Tanya, how are you?
Hi.
Yeah, you won't be able to see us, and I have a habit of waving at your screen because we don't have a camera here, but thank you for joining us, even though you had somewhat bad weather.
Yeah, I was actually in the plane and buckled up, and we were moving through the inner harbor, about to take off, and we had a sharp turn and ended back at the dock. So I do apologize. I was really excited and really looking forward to being there to meet everyone in person, so I apologize.
Well, no worries, but thank you very, very much. So I read your title, which is the world's longest title. But can you explain exactly what that long title means?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. So my title is the Director for Capacity Building for Citizen Engagement in the BC government. And basically the approach that we've taken and why my title is as it is that we're looking at building capacity for building skills and building people and building knowledge and learning for all 30,000 of our BC government employees, because we believe in order to engage citizens, we need our public service in every ministry, from park rangers to forest workers to people at advanced education and education in all of our sectors, to actually understand. So I'm going to look up at the camera to understand what it is that citizen engagement is, why we're doing it, why we're moving in that direction, and how social media is one part of the toolkit in which we engage citizens. So for me, it's really taking a look at the BC Public Service and help building our culture and our organization and our skills within our corporation.
And how long has your department been in existence? Is this something new under Premier Clark, or has this been around since Premier Campbell, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it was around since Premier Campbell. We were called the Future of Work at one point and have changed a little bit. But our team, I think, citizen engagement sort of became an important piece about a year and a half ago. But a lot of the focus started back last November. So a lot of our work has kind of become more public since last November.
So what would we have seen in terms of online engagement that's come out of your office? What's an initiative that your department has completed recently that we'd be aware of?
Sure. Well, one of the things we do is help other ministries. So you would have seen things through other ministries. So one of them being the Water Act modernization was one of the first groups to use the blog technology to get input from citizens on changes to the Water Act. And so that was a project that our team was very, very involved in and took a leadership role. Also, you may have heard of Apps for Climate Action, which was a project whereby we helped developers. We had a contest for developers to develop apps related to climate change. Yep. And we're part of that process, and we help lots of other ministries. We've been working with Emergency Management BC and their Twitter feeds and Facebook, and trying to help them do some of their planning and provide sort of policy support and planning support to all other ministries, all of the other ministries.
Does each ministry have it's kind of a multi-part question. Does each ministry have a separate social media policy? And does each ministry have a separate social media presence, like a separate Facebook account and or Twitter account?
So the answer is no to both of those questions, but the answer maybe is more, it depends. So there's a corporate policy, and Dave, I've given you that information, and you can share that as you need to with the audience. So there's a corporate policy for all of government. In some cases, there actually needs to be specific policy, and so I'll just give you one example. So for children and youth workers in the Ministry of Children and Family Development are looking at how they can use these tools to communicate with youth, and so that's a little bit more complicated from a privacy perspective and from a whole bunch of perspectives. So they're actually looking at maybe more specific policy and looking at that issue, but for right now, there's a corporate policy for all of government, and I'm happy to share that with everyone through Dave, because Dave has that information. And no, not every ministry is using social media, and probably not every ministry needs to. We're in early stages. We released our policy back in November of last year, so about 10 months ago now. And so people are really investigating, they're thinking through their ideas, trying to plan, and that's where we come in. We try to help them plan. We have, I think, 13 Facebook pages, 4 Flickr accounts, 8 YouTube channels, 7 blogs right now, and 15 corporate Twitter accounts. But government is so vast and huge. So we know that there's a lot of other ideas and a lot of other things coming up, and so that's but for right now, that's kind of where we are 10 months in.
So how do you use those 15 accounts, those 20 accounts, those 4 accounts? There's a lot of accounts that you talk about. Are those directed by a team of people? Or are they directed by the ministers? Who are we talking to on Twitter, for example, and I'm guessing here for the Ministry of Transportation? Who are we actually engaging with?
Well, it really depends. I think that's the interesting part about being such a large corporation and taking different approaches. So the Ministry of Transportation, as an example, has a social media team. They have a Flickr account, a YouTube channel, a blog, a recent Facebook page. So their team develops that, and you would be talking to them as they organize and how they resource that. In some cases, it would be the ministry government communications group. That's the way they've organized it. So it really, really just depends. The Ministry of Education does some things with literacy and Read Now, but they're looking at other options, and they're actually thinking about how do all of their employees actually start participating and listening to what people are saying about education. So everyone's taking a bit of a different approach, and we really like that. We don't think there's one model for every organization, for every ministry. And what we're trying to do is have a look at what works. And one of the biggest questions is how we resource this. So we're having a look at how different ministries are resourcing it, whether it's with a team internally, government communications, or otherwise. So it's interesting times because it's still early, and we still get to figure out what works.
Well, you know, I've just put on the screen beside you, I know you can't see it, but the website that we talked about, which is, and I had the address up there for the audience here. It's really, really long, as you guys in government seem to like to do, but we've got it up there. We have the password and the ID, and it's Engaging Using Social Media is the name of this website, this back-end website from the government. What can we find when we all go into that part of your website?
Sure. So just a little bit of context is, given that we're a very large organization, and you can imagine releasing guidelines on the use of social media takes a fair bit more than just releasing a policy, or what I always talk about is getting beyond the PDF. So it's great that we have a PDF policy document that states how we can use social media, but there was so much more that was required beyond that. People needed clarification about the personal use of tools at work. They wanted to understand the difference between personal use of social media and professional use. There was a lot of questions initially just in the orientation phase about why would we even use social media as government? What is government even doing in this space? And so part of what our team has done and really focused on is providing that culture change and that support and that learning help for employees to actually understand this. So what we have we have an internal intranet site with a section called Citizen Engagement and Social Media, and within that section we provide information, tools, discovery, so people can understand what Twitter is and how you plan for it in BC government. We have success stories, how we profile different projects, because this is really project-based learning as we go. So what we've done is create that site is interactive, and there's comments and discussion boards and blogs and all of that. But what we wanted to do was take that material and make it available for everyone, because for one, it's not complete, and we could use help getting better content on there, but also that we didn't want people to have to develop all of that for themselves, because we had developed that here. So that's available for everyone, and you can go through and kind of see sort of the context and why we're even talking about citizen engagement. And there's a number of Twitter, Facebook, and blogging modules, how you plan for those within the government, and then a number of resources also for folks to have access to. And the only thing we ask is that if you're going to use this information publicly in any way, you just make sure you give us attribute it to us. So that's sort of all we ask. We're hoping actually to make that a public document, an open site. That's kind of where we're working towards, and using a Creative Commons license. That's sort of our vision for where that is. But for right now, it's password protected, but you're all free to use that. And if you have any feedback for us, we're more than happy to get that feedback as well.
How have you overcome resistance to social media? Because certainly in government, they seem to be very risk adverse. So how have you overcome that, or how are you overcoming it, I would think is probably the better question.
Yeah, well, I think, yes, I mean, how are we? Well, one of the things that I'm just kind of pulling up, I have some notes today made, but there's a number of different ways. One is we know we have to move. We have lots of employees who have amazing ideas. And part of the challenge is I call it getting the ideas through the clay layer, but getting those ideas up the chain for for executive to consider the ideas. Often what we find is that there's lots of ideas brewing, but they're not really moving forward as fast as people would like necessarily. So there's a couple pieces. One is getting employees who have the ideas to understand what it takes to make a pitch to their executive and how to manage those risks, and how to you could have the best strategy in the world, but if you can't convince anyone of your strategy, then you're not going to make it happen. So part of our training and our learning is to help employees move their ideas forward. We spend a lot of time helping them with that. We also try to get at what I call the clay layer, which is that layer between executive and those ideas, and try to talk to them and orient them about why we're doing this and why it's important, and what risks are there, but how we're going to manage the risks rather than just being afraid of the risk. And the last thing is just working with executive and trying to get them more comfortable with this conversation and get them to understand the whole concept of changing on the fly and being able to adjust your strategy, and the fact that you can't control all the messages and you can't control everything. So so that's really briefly, I mean, it's much more comprehensive than that.
Absolutely. And you said something good there. We'd actually talked about that a little earlier about controlling the message, and that can be very difficult. And that's why I find in government, it's especially that. So how do you manage the vast amount of input that you must get via Twitter and Facebook, et cetera? Is it just people talking into a void, or how do you keep the engagement going?
Well, we really focus on moderation, and how building that kind of skill set within government. It isn't one that we've had so far, and we have a lot of discussions about what a moderator looks like and how we do that in government, and then also looking at how we do issues resolution in the environment of social media for government, because issues management is what government does really, really well, and we haven't done it in this space. So we talk, we work with different ministries and talk about their moderation approach, and we have a moderation policy which states, what you can post and what will be posted and what won't be posted. Our hope is, I think right now we do outreach fairly well within government. I'm not sure we do the two-way dialogue very well, but that's part of why we exist and part of the conversation we have with folks, both related to face-to-face and social media. So it's not isolated to social media.
Let me just see if there's any questions here from the audience. Does anyone have a question for Tanya? In the back of the room. But as I walk to the back here, who is allowed to respond via social media on behalf of a ministry?
Well, that's, again, what part of the whole planning process is we work through with the organization. So I'll just give you an example. I was working with the Ministry of Education, and what we had was actual moderators identified that would be working with their social media accounts. And what we had is some content, sort of a content plan, a content strategy built, 2 to 3 months out, so that we would work with communications and make sure, that everybody was comfortable with that, but recognizing that we were going to have to respond as we go. So a lot of our messages are around trusting employees to work in this environment, but also training and supporting them to do that. And so it really is different depending on the organization. In some cases, government communications is approving responses and content, but we really, that's not the ideal place, I don't think, to be to have approvals, because in this environment we have to be able to respond quickly. So it's about, you know, changing the culture and getting everybody comfortable with how we're doing it and how we're working.
All right, we have a question here from an audience member.
Hi there, Tanya. It's Karen.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
I'm good.
You guys know each other?
I know you. Yeah.
Oh.
Small world.
No hard questions.
You guys can't afford long distance?
We saw each other in Portland last, actually. I wanted to ask a question. I think the site that you shared with us on the citizen engagement tools for public sector employees is really fantastic. And one thing that sort of jumped out at me when you were talking about it was that you talked about sharing success stories. And I think that's super important, especially when you're at the point where you are trying to get through that clay layer, as you call it. But I think that especially with this kind of work with citizen engagement, there's probably as much, if not more, learning to come from the failures that you experience. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about whether there are opportunities for public sector employees to be sharing some of the experiences they had that didn't turn out so well, even if that's not in a publicly accessible setting like the website that you've shown us.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. That's a good question. Absolutely. I mean, I actually believe we can learn a lot from our failures, if they're called failures in this environment. Yeah, I think one of the things that we do internally, at least, is we have sessions similar to this with employees where we even bring projects in that haven't moved forward and talk about why they haven't moved forward. And a lot of times maybe it's about timing or it's about risk, and it gets, you know, to the approval place and people get nervous. So we absolutely do a lot of that, or do some of that. I mean, again, we're in early days, and I actually have a person sitting behind me who has just come on board to help do a lot more of this profiling of projects and meeting with people who are trying to move forward and interviewing them and seeing what we can both make public and we can discuss internally. So absolutely, I mean, we have to do that, and it's the only way we'll move forward if we can understand where we're not doing things right. So absolutely.
All right, great. Well, Tanya, you know, that's our time for today, but thank you so much. Everyone that needs the website, it's beside you. Trust me, it's over to your right side.
Awesome.
So if you want to look like you're looking at it, that'd be cool. But the website's up there. Yeah, that's it. And again, thank you for your time. Thank you. Yes, that's perfect. Thank you for sharing with us what government's doing. And this is a pretty vocal group, so I think you're going to get some feedback off that website you shared with us. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome. Have a great time. I'm so sorry I can't be there.
Great, thank you. Tanya, thank you very, very much.
Bye.